In the shadowed days of the War of the Ring, two dark towers loomed over Middle-earth, Barad-dûr in the east and Orthanc in the west, projecting an illusion of unity under a single dark purpose. To the outside world, it seemed that Sauron and Saruman stood shoulder to shoulder, twin architects of ruin, their banners of black and white rippling in ominous accord. Yet this alliance was nothing more than a calculated masquerade, a brittle facade concealing a deeper, far more dangerous truth. Beneath their shared symbols and whispered counsels simmered a rivalry, one born not of loyalty, but of ambition, suspicion, and veiled treachery. Saruman, the head of the White Council, had not submitted to the will of Mordor. He had merely chosen to walk beside it until he could surpass it, while Sauron, the Dark Lord, believed himself the sole master of all things. He underestimated the ambition of the once noble wizard who had long studied his devices and secretly coveted his dominion. Their cooperation was a duel in disguise. A secret war fought not with open battle, but through manipulation, misdirection, and relentless pursuit of the One Ring. Every move they made was laced with ulterior motives. While Sauron hunted the ring to reclaim his ancient power, Saruman sought it to wrest that same power from him. In truth, Isengard and Mordor were never allies. They were rival blades drawn in the dark, each hoping to strike first. This was no partnership. It was a cold war masked by ceremony. A deadly chess match played across the ruins of Middle-earth. And as the storm gathered, it became clear only one could triumph. For in their hearts, both sought not to serve, but to rule. In the secret war of the Two Towers, there was no room for equals, only conquest. Long before their names became synonymous with fear, before towers were raised and empires forged, Sauron and Saruman were not tyrants, but kindred spirits. Both were Maer, lesser Aenir born from the thought of Eru Iluvatar, and both were drawn to the forge and form of All the Smith, one of the Vala. It was in All-es halls that they first shaped their identities, not as masters of war, but as lovers of order, craft, and creation. Sauron, then called Mairon, was revered for his precision, his hunger for perfection. Saruman, later known as Curunír, shared this devotion to structure and knowledge. They were not born in opposition. They were reflections of one another, split by time and choice. And therein lies the irony. The seed of their rivalry was sown in their similarities. It was precisely because Saruman understood Sauron so well that he became so dangerous. He knew the temptations, the methods, the allure of dominion. He did not fear Sauron. He studied him, mirrored him, and ultimately envied him. Sauron, in turn, recognized in Saruman a threat masked as a disciple. Those centuries would pass between their first steps in Arda and the War of the Ring. The echoes of their origins never faded. Saruman's fall was not a plummet, but a slow spiral inward, the same descent Sauron had once taken. Only with the vanity of believing he could master the path his predecessor had stumbled upon. What unfolded between them was not merely a battle for land or title. It was a battle of ideologies born from the same divine spark. In the end, their conflict was a dark mirror. Two spirits who once stood side by side at the dawn of the world, now locked in silent warfare, each seeking to bend the fate of Middle-earth not in service of others, but in the image of their own will. Saruman's descent into darkness was not marked by a single dramatic fall. It was a quiet, calculated corrosion of the soul, the kind that begins with curiosity and ends in ruin. At first, his thirst for knowledge was noble. He immersed himself in the study of Sauron's devices not to imitate, but to defeat. Yet over time, that study became obsession. The more he learned of the Dark Lord's power, the more he began to covet it, not as a warning, but as a blueprint. He told himself he could master it, control it, wield it better. And so, in the fortress of Orthanc, cloaked in secrecy, he began laying the foundation for his own dominion. The White Wizard, once chief among the wise, began to drift into isolation, hoarding knowledge, manipulating allies. and planting seeds of ambition beneath the banner of wisdom. His eyes turned to Isengard not as a watchtower against evil, but as a throne of his own making. He courted the power of the Palantir. Knowing the risk, he bred creatures in mockery of life. And most damning of all, he ceased to see himself as a guardian of Middle-earth, but as its rightful master. The ring, Sauron's ring, was no longer a threat in Saruman's eyes. It was an opportunity. With it, he believed he could seize what Sauron had built and twist it into something new, something ruled not by a shadow in the east, but by a self-anointed god in the west. Thus, his betrayal was not born of fear, but of pride. Saruman did not fall by accident. He chose to fall. He believed he could touch the fire and not be burned. But in seeking to control the darkness, he let it reshape him. And what rose from Orthanc was no longer a steward of the light, but a rival to it. When the White Council was formed, it was hailed as a beacon of unity, a gathering of the wisest minds in Middle-earth, sworn to stand against the growing shadow in the east. And at its helm sat Saruman the White, chosen not merely for his stature, but for his deep knowledge of Sauron's ancient arts. None could rival his scholarship, his command of lore, or his silver-tongued counsel. Yet beneath the robes of wisdom and authority, a darker current flowed. Saruman did not merely seek to resist Sauron. He sought to replace him. Every council meeting, every discussion about the ring or Dol Guldur became a stage for his manipulation. When Gandalf urged swift action against the necromancer, Saruman resisted, not because he disbelieved, but because delay served his secret design. If the One Ring were to return, he wished to be the one to find it. He spoke in measured tones, masking ambition with caution, lulling the council into hesitation while time moved ever in his favor. Even as Galadriel, Elrond, and Mithrandir saw through the fog, Saruman cloaked his intentions in layers of logic and restraint. The irony? The council, created to combat darkness, had unwittingly placed it in charge. Saruman's leadership became a leash, not on the enemy, but on his allies. Through charm and calculated delays, he steered the council away from early confrontation, giving both himself and Sauron time to grow stronger. And so, what should have been a force of swift justice became mired in doubt, tangled in the web of Saruman's ambition. The greatest threat was not the shadow beyond the forest, but the shadow seated among the wise. In the end, the White Council would learn too late that its trusted guide was already walking a path veiled in treachery, drawn forward not by duty, but by desire. The hunt for the One Ring was no noble quest. It was a shadow game, played by those who cloaked their lust for power in wisdom and strategy. As whispers of the ring's presence stirred once more in Middle-earth, both Sauron and Saruman began their secret chase, each believing themselves destined to wield its might. For Sauron, the ring was the key to restoring his full strength and bending the world to his will once again. For Saruman, it was the final piece in a grand design, his chance not only to rival the Dark Lord, but to eclipse him. And so, while Sauron dispatched his nine across the land, Saruman unleashed his own web of spies, intercepting messages, misleading enemies, and planting his influence among the free peoples. He scavenged ancient relics, even uncovering the very casket that had once held the ring around Isildur's neck. But the ring itself eluded him, slipping like a phantom through time, always one step beyond his grasp. His servants misdirected Sauron's agents and disrupted Mordor's movements, but for all their cunning, the prize remained hidden. In his desperation, Saruman even manipulated the White Council into attacking Dol Guldur, not to destroy evil, but to scramble Sauron's search and increase his own chances. Every decision, every delay, every council meeting cloaked in concern was, in truth, a maneuver in a deeper game. Saruman's eyes were always turned westward, toward the lands of Rohan and the Anduin, for he believed the ring might lie there, just beyond reach. And in that belief, his actions grew bolder, his ambitions more reckless. This was no alliance of good versus evil. It was a silent war among hunters, where each step forward was a move on a treacherous board. The One Ring was not just a weapon. It was the throne they each sought to claim. From the outside, Isengard remained a fortress of stone and wisdom, a citadel governed by the voice of the White Wizard. But within its walls, something darker was taking root. Saruman, once a steward of balance, had begun to transform his sanctuary into a citadel of war. His thoughts no longer lingered on lore or counsel, but on dominion and strength. Beneath the Tower of Orthanc, forges blazed day and night. The rivers ran dark with industry. Wolves, orcs, and the twisted remnants of men gathered under a new banner, the White Hand. But this was not a gift to Mordor. It was a challenge. Saruman had no intention of bowing to Sauron. He was crafting a force to rival him. The Uruk-hai, black-blooded, broad-shouldered, merciless, were his answer to Mordor's legions. Bred in secret and trained for war, these creatures could march in sunlight, fight without fear, and speak with cunning. They bore not the eye of Sauron, but Saruman's mark, symbols of a rival empire. Isengard was no longer a watchtower for the West. It was a new power rising in the North, born of ambition and treachery. Even the Dunlendings, bitter enemies of Rohan, were rallied to his cause. And all the while, Saruman watched the horizon, waiting for the One Ring to appear, knowing that with it, he could complete his dominion. The war machines of Isengard were not built in tribute to Barad-dûr, but as a declaration, I am not your servant. I am your equal. In turning Isengard into an engine of war, Saruman did not merely prepare for battle. He declared independence from Mordor. What rose in the valley of Nan Curunír was not a second tower in Sauron's shadow. It was a dark mirror, one that reflected the same hunger, cloaked in white, daring to challenge the black. The Palantir, ancient, enigmatic, and perilous, was never meant to be a servant's toy. But for Saruman, it became both a mirror and a snare. At first, he resisted its call. For years, the stone sat unused in the depths of Orthanc, its polished surface hiding the vast reach of its gaze. But ambition is a patient seducer, and eventually, the White Wizard's hunger overcame his caution. In the year 3000 of the Third Age, Saruman looked into the Palantir, and Sauron looked back. What he saw was not lies, but carefully sculpted fragments of truth. The growing tide of Mordor, the inevitability of Sauron's victory, the futility of resistance. And Saruman, prideful and cunning, convinced himself he could outmaneuver it all. He told himself that alliance was strategy, not surrender, that by bending the knee now, he might rise higher than ever before. But the Palantir does not yield control lightly. Though Saruman retained his own mind, Sauron began to press upon his will, subtly bending his choices, feeding his fear, and reinforcing his envy. The very tools Saruman hoped to master began to unravel his resistance from within. Yet make no mistake, he was no mindless thrall. His betrayal of the free peoples and his double-dealing with Mordor were not coerced acts, but calculated ones. He still believed he could rise above Sauron, that he could wrest the One Ring and use it for himself. The Palantir did not enslave him. It merely revealed the depths of ambition already growing in his heart. In seeking to wield the enemy's power, Saruman opened a door, and the shadow stepped in. What followed was not a loss of control, but the corruption of intent. Saruman remained at the helm, but it was a ship steering straight toward ruin, drawn by the beacon of a power he would never truly possess. In a moment as symbolic as it was damning, Saruman cast off his white robes and proclaimed himself Saruman of many colors. It was more than vanity, it was declaration. No longer did he see himself as a servant of balance, nor as a leader of the wise. He was a power unto himself, and upon his finger gleamed a ring, newly forged, unspoken in origin, but unmistakably born of ambition. I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman Ringmaker, he told Gandalf with pride. Though not one of the original rings of power, this creation was no idle trinket. It was an echo, a challenge, a claim to forbidden knowledge once reserved for Sauron and Celebrimbor alone. Saruman had long studied ring lore. He was second only to Sauron in understanding its craft. And though he lacked the dark essence to forge a ring of true dominion, his creation still carried weight. For if the rings of power amplify the traits of their bearers, greed, pride, longing, then Saruman's ring, however lesser, could still inflame the hunger burning within him. It was a symbol of defiance, a quiet rebellion cast in gold. Sauron, ever watchful, surely knew of this act, and he offered no aid, no encouragement. For he understood what Saruman's new ring represented. Not allegiance, but aspiration. To teach him more would be to hand a rival the tools of insurrection. And so Saruman pressed forward alone, believing that if he could find the One Ring, he could unlock the final secrets, complete his design, and stand as master, not just over Mordor, but over all of Middle-earth. The forging of his ring was the point of no return. It was no longer about resistance, or wisdom, or even survival. Saruman was building a throne, one ring at a time, and he would not stop until the crown was his. Saruman's mask of wisdom shattered the day Gandalf stood atop Orthanc and refused to kneel. What began as a cordial summons quickly spiraled into revelation. No longer did Gandalf face the white wizard of old, but a man transformed, cloaked in many colors, cloaked in ambition. Saruman spoke not of resistance to Sauron, but of partnership, of survival, of ruling in the shadow rather than falling in the light. And then, the truth spilled forth. He sought the One Ring for himself, not to deliver it to Barad-dûr, but to wield it, to become the new master of Middle-earth. His voice, once trusted, now dripped with persuasion and concealed violence. "Why not the ruling ring, Gandalf?" he whispered. "Why not us?" It was in that moment that Saruman's treason became undeniable, not only to Gandalf, but eventually to all who would listen. When Gandalf refused, Saruman imprisoned him atop Orthanc, revealing just how far he had strayed. But the winds of fate stirred. Gwaihir, the Wind Lord, came, and Gandalf was borne away, tearing the veil from Saruman's hidden betrayal. Word spread to Rivendell. The White Council no longer had a leader, they had a traitor. Worse still, Sauron, through the Palantir, had sensed Saruman's duplicity. He knew the wizard plotted to claim the ring, not return it. But the Dark Lord, ever the strategist, masked his wrath and waited, allowing Saruman to carry on, until the day he could be crushed. From that point forward, Saruman stood utterly alone, reviled by the free peoples, distrusted by Mordor. His power had grown, but so had his isolation. His dreams of domination remained, but they now walked a path walled in enemies. The hunt for the ring was no longer a game of secrets. It had become a race, and Saruman had just been unmasked for what he truly was, a pretender and a threat to all. As war thundered across Middle-earth, many believe Saruman's assault on Rohan was simply a strategic move to support Mordor, to cripple the Riders of the Mark so they could not ride to Gondor's aid. But that belief, while widespread, is deeply mistaken. By the time Saruman unleashed his Uruk-hai and turned Isengard into a war machine, his alliance with Sauron was already broken in all but name. The Dark Lord knew of his betrayal. Saruman knew he had no hope of favor. His war was not fought for Mordor. It was fought out of desperation, driven by one final, burning hope, that the One Ring might lie hidden somewhere within Rohan. Every blade he forged, every order he gave, every drop of blood spilled was part of a reckless gambit to seize that power before Sauron could. He feared not Sauron's wrath, he feared being too late. In his twisted mind, Theoden, king of Rohan, was not merely an obstacle. He was a potential rival, a man who might stumble upon the ring and change the tides of fate. So Saruman struck hard, hoping to overrun the Riddermark, to scour its plains and rivers, to tear every stone apart if it meant finding the precious weapon. The war for Rohan was not a gift to Mordor. It was a last-ditch crusade for supremacy. And as his Uruk-hai marched under the White Hand, not the Red Eye, Saruman wagered everything on one final outcome, that he, not Sauron, would hold the ring. But in doing so, he exposed himself completely. No longer shrouded in diplomacy or lies, Saruman stood revealed as a rebel, a warmonger, a fallen wizard whose hunger had consumed reason. He had crossed the threshold from strategist to tyrant, and in the fires of Helm's Deep, his grand illusion would face its reckoning. The secret war between Saruman and Sauron was not waged with banners, but with ambition, deception, and a shared lust for the One Ring. Once kindred spirits, shaped by all, their paths diverged into darkness, each seeking dominion through knowledge, manipulation, and raw power. From the halls of the White Council to the forges of Isengard, Saruman's descent was a masterclass in self-deception, wrapped in the illusion of wisdom. His betrayal, his false alliance, and his desperate war on Rohan all stem from single truth. He did not wish to serve darkness, he wished to rule it, and in that, he became its slave.